Sarah Martinez had always dreamed of serving her country. Growing up in a small Texas town, she watched her grandfather polish his old military medals every Sunday morning, telling stories of battles fought and brothers lost. When she turned 18, Sarah knew exactly where her future lay. The Navy SEALs had never seen anyone quite like Sarah. Standing barely 5 feet tall, with a prosthetic left leg from a childhood accident, she seemed an unlikely candidate for one of the most elite military units in the world. But Sarah had something that couldn't be measured in height or physical perfection, an unbreakable spirit and determination that impressed even the toughest instructors. Her journey to becoming a SEAL was filled with obstacles that would have crushed most people. During basic training, other recruits whispered behind her back, wondering how someone with a disability could possibly make it through the grueling program. Sarah heard every word, but she used their doubt as fuel to push harder, run faster, and prove that courage comes in many forms. The defining moment of Sarah's military career came during a classified mission in Afghanistan. Her unit was tasked with rescuing 3 American hostages held in a heavily fortified compound. Intelligence suggested the operation would be straightforward, but everything went wrong from the moment they touched down. Enemy fire erupted from multiple positions as Sarah's team approached the target building. In the chaos, her squad leader was hit, and 2 other team members were pinned down by sniper fire. Sarah found herself in an impossible situation: abandon the mission and save her team, or risk everything to complete the rescue. Without hesitation, Sarah made a choice that would define her legacy. Despite her prosthetic leg making movement difficult across the rocky terrain, she crawled through enemy fire for over 200 yards. Bullets whistled past her head as she dragged her wounded squad leader to safety behind a concrete barrier. But Sarah wasn't finished. The hostages were still trapped inside the compound, and time was running out. Radio chatter indicated that enemy reinforcements were approaching fast. In a decision that amazed her teammates, Sarah volunteered to go in alone while the others provided cover fire. Moving through the building room by room, Sarah systematically neutralized multiple armed guards. Her training kicked in as muscle memory guided her movements. Each door she opened could have been her last, but she pressed forward with methodical precision. In the basement of the compound, she found the 3 American civilians, 2 journalists, and an aid worker, chained and barely conscious after days of captivity. They looked at this small woman in military gear with disbelief, unable to comprehend that their salvation had arrived in such an unexpected form. Getting the hostages out proved even more challenging than getting in. One journalist had a broken leg and couldn't walk. The aid worker was suffering from severe dehydration and kept losing consciousness. Sarah had to half-carry, half-drag each person to the extraction point, while enemy forces closed in from all sides. The helicopter pilot later said he had never seen anything like it. Sarah Martinez emerging from that compound with 3 rescued Americans, her uniform torn and bloody, her prosthetic leg damaged but still functional, moving with the determination of someone who refused to leave anyone behind. The successful mission saved 3 innocent lives and provided crucial intelligence that led to the capture of several high-value terrorist targets. Sarah's commanding officer immediately recommended her for the Silver Star, one of the military's highest honors for gallantry in action. Months later, at a ceremony attended by hundreds of military personnel and their families, Sarah stood proudly as the Silver Star was pinned to her chest. The citation read that her extraordinary heroism and selfless devotion to duty had exemplified the finest traditions of naval service. It was a moment she had dreamed of since childhood, official recognition that she belonged among America's finest warriors. The medal meant everything to Sarah, not because of its silver and bronze construction, but because of what it represented. It was proof that courage isn't determined by physical perfection, that heroism comes from the heart, and that anyone willing to sacrifice for others can make a difference in the world. For 2 years after receiving the Silver Star, Sarah continued her military service with distinction. She trained new recruits, participated in additional missions, and became a role model for disabled veterans across the country. Speaking engagements and interviews highlighted her story, inspiring countless young people to pursue their dreams regardless of physical limitations. But Sarah's proudest moments weren't the public appearances or media attention. They were the quiet conversations with struggling veterans who had lost limbs or suffered injuries that made them question their worth. To them, Sarah was living proof that life after military injury could still be meaningful and heroic. The silver star she wore represented not just her own bravery, but the courage of every veteran who had overcome adversity to serve something greater than themselves. It was a symbol of hope, determination, and the unbreakable spirit that defines America's military heroes. Little did Sarah know that this cherished medal, and the recognition it represented, would soon become the center of a controversy that would test her character once again. The same courage that earned her the Silver Star would be called upon in a very different kind of battle, one fought not on foreign soil, but in an American courtroom. Judge Robert Harrison had built his reputation on running one of the strictest courtrooms in the state. For 15 years, his black robes had commanded absolute respect, and his word was law within the mahogany-paneled walls of Courtroom 3A. Known for his zero-tolerance policy on what he considered inappropriate attire, Judge Harrison believed that respect for the judicial system began with proper dress codes. Sarah Martinez never expected to find herself standing before Judge Harrison's bench. After completing her military service, she had returned to civilian life, earning a degree in social work and dedicating herself to helping other veterans navigate the challenges of post-military life. Her Silver Star remained pinned to a simple blazer she wore to formal occasions, a quiet reminder of her service and sacrifice. The case that brought Sarah to Judge Harrison's courtroom seemed straightforward enough. She was testifying as a character witness for Marcus Thompson, a fellow veteran who had served under her command in Afghanistan. Marcus was facing charges related to a bar fight that had gotten out of hand, and Sarah believed the court needed to understand the context of his struggle with post-traumatic stress disorder. On that Tuesday morning in October, Sarah dressed carefully for court. She wore a conservative navy blue suit with her Silver Star prominently displayed above the left breast pocket, positioned exactly as military protocol dictated. The medal caught the fluorescent courtroom lights as she walked through the security checkpoint. Its ribbons and Silver Star a stark reminder of the battles she had fought overseas. Marcus's attorney had briefed Sarah on what to expect. She would be called to testify about Marcus's character, his military service, and the challenges many veterans faced when transitioning to civilian life. It was testimony she had given before in similar cases, using her own experience and credentials to help fellow veterans receive fair treatment in the justice system. As proceedings began, Judge Harrison's eyes immediately fixated on Sarah's Silver Star. His expression darkened as he observed the military decoration, and those familiar with his courtroom demeanor recognized the signs of his growing irritation. Judge Harrison had strong opinions about what he called attention-seeking behavior, and to him, wearing military medals in civilian court appeared to be exactly that. When Sarah was called to the witness stand, she approached with the same confident bearing that had served her in military service. She placed her right hand on the Bible, raised her left hand, and prepared to take the oath that would allow her to speak on Marcus's behalf. But before the bailiff could begin administering the oath, Judge Harrison's voice cut through the courtroom's silence like a blade. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to remove that medal before proceeding." Sarah looked up at the judge with confusion. "Excuse me, Your Honor?" "The military decoration on your jacket," Judge Harrison said, his tone growing more stern. "This is a civilian courtroom, not a military parade ground. Remove it immediately." A shocked silence fell over the courtroom. The court reporter stopped typing mid-sentence. Marcus's attorney looked up from his notes with surprise. Even the bailiff, himself a veteran, shifted uncomfortably at his post. Sarah felt her heart racing, but her voice remained steady. "Your Honor, this is the Silver Star. I earned this medal for gallantry in action while serving my country. I wear it as a reminder of my service and the oath I took to defend the Constitution, the same Constitution that establishes the authority of this court." Judge Harrison's face reddened with anger. "Young lady, I don't care what that piece of metal represents. In my courtroom, you will not display what I consider to be attention-seeking decorations. Remove it now, or you will not be permitted to testify." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Attention-seeking decorations? The Silver Star that she had earned by crawling through enemy fire, by risking her life to save American hostages, by proving that courage knows no physical limitations, reduced to nothing more than a shiny piece of metal designed to draw attention. Marcus Thompson, sitting at the defendant's table, watched the exchange with growing distress. This was the woman who had saved his life in Afghanistan. The same person who had dragged him to safety when shrapnel from an IED had left him bleeding in a ditch. Now she was being humiliated in front of a room full of strangers by a judge who clearly had no understanding of military service or sacrifice. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she looked down at the Silver Star. In that moment, she thought about all the veterans she had counseled who felt forgotten and disrespected by a society that didn't understand their sacrifices. She thought about the families of fallen soldiers who would never see their loved ones wear their medals again. She thought about her grandfather, polishing his own medals every Sunday, teaching her that military honors were sacred symbols of service and sacrifice. "Your Honor," Sarah said, her voice growing stronger with each word, "I respectfully decline to remove my Silver Star. This medal was awarded to me by the United States Navy for extraordinary heroism in combat. It represents not just my service, but the service of every man and woman who has put their life on the line for this country. I will not dishonor their sacrifice by treating this decoration as if it were a piece of costume jewelry." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Some spectators nodded in approval, while others seemed shocked by Sarah's defiance of judicial authority. Judge Harrison's gavel came down hard on his bench, the sharp crack echoing through the room like a gunshot. "Ma'am, you are in contempt of this court," Judge Harrison declared, his voice rising with indignation. "I am ordering the bailiff to remove you from these proceedings immediately. Furthermore, you are banned from testifying in this case or any future case in my courtroom until you learn to show proper respect for judicial authority." As the bailiff approached, Sarah stood straight and tall, her prosthetic legs steady beneath her, her shoulders squared in perfect military bearing. She looked directly at Judge Harrison, and in that moment, something shifted in her expression. The same steely determination that had carried her through enemy fire in Afghanistan now focused on the man behind the bench. "Your Honor," Sarah said, her voice carrying a quiet authority that commanded attention, "I have spent my life showing respect for legitimate authority and defending the principles this nation was founded upon. What happened here today was not an exercise in judicial authority. It was an abuse of power against a disabled veteran who earned the right to wear this medal through blood and sacrifice." With those words hanging in the air, Sarah turned and walked toward the courtroom exit, her head held high, her Silver Star gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Every eye in the room followed her progress, and many spectators rose to their feet in a spontaneous show of respect. Sarah Martinez walked out of Judge Harrison's courtroom with her dignity intact, but the humiliation burned deep in her chest. As she reached her car in the courthouse parking lot, she sat behind the steering wheel for several minutes, trying to process what had just happened. The Silver Star on her blazer felt heavier now, weighted with the memory of a judge who had called it an attention-seeking decoration. Unknown to Sarah, her confrontation with Judge Harrison had been witnessed by more than just the people in the courtroom that day. Among the spectators was Jennifer Walsh, an investigative journalist who had been covering Marcus Thompson's case for the local newspaper. Jennifer had served as an Army medic before transitioning to journalism, and she immediately recognized both the significance of Sarah's silver star and the inappropriateness of Judge Harrison's demand. Within hours of leaving the courtroom, Jennifer was on the phone with her editor, pitching a story that she knew would resonate far beyond their local readership. "This isn't just about one judge's bad behavior," Jennifer explained. "This is about how we treat our veterans, especially disabled veterans who have sacrificed everything for this country." The first article appeared in the Sunday edition of the paper, 3 days after the courtroom incident. Jennifer had done her homework, researching both Sarah's military record and Judge Harrison's history on the bench. What she discovered painted a troubling picture of a judge who had consistently shown bias against veterans, military families, and anyone he perceived as challenging his authority. The headline read, "Judge orders disabled Navy SEAL to remove Silver Star in courtroom confrontation." The article detailed Sarah's heroic service record, the circumstances under which she earned her Silver Star, and the exchange with Judge Harrison. But Jennifer didn't stop there. She had also uncovered a pattern of similar behavior from the judge. Over the past 5 years, Judge Harrison had held multiple veterans in contempt for wearing military insignia in his courtroom. He had once ordered a Gold Star mother to remove a pin commemorating her son, who died in Iraq. He had banned a Purple Heart recipient from testifying while wearing his medal. The pattern was clear and disturbing. The story exploded across social media within hours of publication. Veterans organizations shared it thousands of times. Active duty military personnel posted comments expressing outrage. Disabled veterans from across the country began sharing their own stories of discrimination and disrespect in various settings. Sarah's phone rang constantly for 3 days straight. News outlets from major television networks wanted interviews. Veterans advocacy groups offered their support. Fellow SEALs reached out to express their solidarity. But the call that surprised Sarah the most came from retired Admiral Patricia Stevens, who had overseen Sarah's Silver Star ceremony years earlier. "Sarah," Admiral Stevens said, "what happened to you in that courtroom was not just wrong. It was a violation of everything our military stands for. I want you to know that you have the full support of the Navy, and we're going to make sure this is addressed properly." True to her word, Admiral Stevens began making phone calls. The first went to the state's Judicial Ethics Commission, formally requesting an investigation into Judge Harrison's conduct. The second went to the American Legion, the largest veterans organization in the country, asking them to review their legal options for addressing what appeared to be systematic discrimination against veterans in Judge Harrison's courtroom. As the story gained national attention, more troubling details about Judge Harrison's behavior emerged. Court reporters came forward with stories of his inappropriate comments about military service. Attorneys shared examples of his bias against veteran defendants and witnesses. Former clerks described a pattern of behavior that suggested deep-seated prejudice against anyone with military connections. The pressure on the state judicial system became enormous. Protests organized by veterans groups drew thousands of people to the courthouse steps. Members of Congress began asking questions about judicial oversight and accountability. The governor's office received so many calls demanding action that they issued a public statement promising a thorough investigation. Judge Harrison initially tried to defend his actions. In a statement released through his attorney, he claimed that his courtroom policies applied equally to everyone and that he was simply maintaining appropriate decorum. But as more examples of his anti-veteran bias came to light, his position became increasingly untenable. The turning point came when security footage from the courthouse was reviewed by investigators. The video clearly showed Judge Harrison's hostile demeanor toward Sarah, his dismissive attitude when she explained the significance of her Silver Star, and his visible anger at her refusal to remove the medal. The footage contradicted his claims about maintaining neutral decorum. 3 weeks after the initial incident, the Judicial Ethics Commission announced its preliminary findings. Judge Harrison had violated multiple canons of judicial conduct, including failing to maintain impartiality, allowing personal bias to influence his decisions, and creating an atmosphere of intimidation in his courtroom. The commission recommended his immediate suspension pending a full disciplinary hearing. But the consequences didn't stop there. The state Supreme Court, responding to enormous public pressure and clear evidence of misconduct, took the extraordinary step of removing Judge Harrison from all pending cases and reassigning them to other judges. Legal experts called it one of the swiftest actions they had ever seen taken against a sitting judge. The final blow to Judge Harrison's career came when the state legislature, influenced by veterans' advocacy groups and public outrage, passed new legislation specifically protecting the rights of veterans to wear military honors and decorations in all state facilities, including courtrooms. The bill was nicknamed Sarah's Law in honor of the woman who had stood up to judicial bullying. 6 months after ordering Sarah to remove her silver star, Judge Harrison submitted his resignation from the bench. In a brief statement, he claimed he was stepping down for personal reasons. But everyone knew the truth. His career had been destroyed by his own prejudice and abuse of power. The Judicial Disciplinary Board's final report was damning. It found that Judge Harrison had systematically discriminated against veterans and military families, had abused his judicial authority to intimidate witnesses, and had brought discredit upon the entire judicial system. The report recommended that he never be allowed to serve in any judicial capacity again. For Sarah Martinez, the vindication was complete, but bittersweet. She had never wanted to become the center of a national controversy. She had simply wanted to testify on behalf of a fellow veteran. But in standing up for her right to wear the silver star she had earned, she had struck a blow for every veteran who had ever faced discrimination or disrespect. The day after Judge Harrison's resignation was announced, Sarah received a call from Marcus Thompson, the veteran she had originally come to court to support. His case had been heard by a different judge who showed appropriate respect for his military service and PTSD struggles. Marcus received probation and mandatory counseling instead of prison time. "Sarah," Marcus said, his voice choked with emotion, "you saved my life again. First in Afghanistan, and now here at home. I don't know how to thank you." Sarah's response was simple and characteristic of her humility. "That's what we do for each other, Marcus. We never leave anyone behind." The silver star still gleams on Sarah's blazer when she appears in courtrooms across the country, continuing her work as an advocate for veterans' rights. But now it represents something even more significant than her heroism in Afghanistan. It symbolizes the ongoing battle for dignity and respect that veterans fight every day on American soil. Judge Harrison's career was over, destroyed by his own prejudice and abuse of power. Sarah Martinez's legacy, meanwhile, was just beginning. She had proven once again that courage comes in many forms, and sometimes the most important battles are fought not with weapons, but with unwavering principles and the determination to do what is right, regardless of the personal cost.